14 mainstream sponsors are reportedly refusing to support LIV golf events after being confronted with demands for mandatory team mergers. That is not a small advertising disagreement. It is a commercial revolt aimed directly at the franchise system LIV, once presented as professional golf's bold new future. Apparently, corporations enjoy team golf until the teams are ordered to marry one another for financial survival. Why are sponsors walking away, which franchises could disappear? And could this boycott force LIV to rebuild its entire business model? Subscribe as we uncover the money fight television coverage will not explain. Then tell us, should struggling LIV teams merge, or should the league protect every original identity? The reported boycott targets the part of LIV Golf that was supposed to become its greatest commercial asset. From the beginning, LIV argued that recognizable teams could create loyalties extending beyond individual stars. Crushers GC, Legion 13, Four Aces GC, High Flyers GC, Ripper GC, Range Goats GC, and the other franchises were expected to attract sponsors, sell merchandise, build local followings, and eventually hold independent value. Mandatory consolidation would challenge that promise. If two teams are forced together, one badge may vanish, one captain may lose authority, players may be reassigned, and commercial partners could discover that the identity they purchased no longer exists. Sponsors do not pay only for golfers. They pay for stable stories, predictable exposure, and brand supporters can recognize. That explains why 14 reported holdouts would matter. One company pausing negotiations can be dismissed as ordinary business. A coordinated group refusing event support becomes a warning that the marketplace no longer trusts the direction of travel. Golf executives can debate formats all morning, but empty sponsorship boards deliver their verdict before lunch. The precise identities and contractual positions of all 14 sponsors have not been publicly established. That distinction matters. A title partner, team sponsor, event supplier, broadcaster, and hospitality client possess different agreements and different power. Still, the central complaint is credible as a commercial principle. Forced mergers make sponsorship inventory unstable. Imagine paying to place a company beside a team, designing campaigns around its captain, producing merchandise in its colors, and then learning that the franchise may be folded into a rival. The sponsor would not merely lose a logo, it could lose the audience message and exclusivity that justified the investment. But here is the detail LIV cannot hide behind another flashy announcement. Sponsors are not boycotting golf shots. They are boycotting uncertainty. Uncertainty has followed the league since its launch in 2022. LIV arrived with enormous purses, shotgun starts, limited fields, no cuts, and famous defectors including Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Cameron Smith, and later Jon Rahm. Its presentation was loud, expensive, and deliberately different. The team structure sat at the center of the pitch. Captains were not portrayed simply as lineup leaders. They were positioned as franchise builders responsible for culture, commercial growth, and identity. LIV wanted golf to borrow the tribal loyalty found in Formula One, football, and American team sports. Yet traditional teams usually possess history, geography, promotion systems, or generations of inherited support. LIV franchises began with invented names and changing rosters. Their loyalty had to be manufactured quickly, often around whichever superstar wore the captain's armband. That model can work while funding is generous and players remain stable. It becomes vulnerable when costs rise, investors demand returns, or certain teams fail to attract enough independent revenue. At that point, executives face an uncomfortable choice: continue supporting every franchise or combine weaker operations to reduce duplication. On paper, mergers can appear efficient, two offices become one, marketing budgets combine, player contracts can be balanced. Sponsor packages may become larger. The league retains its stars while spending less on management, branding, travel, content, and separate commercial teams. Unfortunately, golf supporters do not cheer for accounting efficiency. Nobody buys a cap because two administrative departments achieved synergy. Fans follow personalities, rivalries, colors, and stories. Destroy those connections carelessly and the league may save money while reducing the product's emotional value. The reported sponsor demands expose that contradiction. Companies want LIV to operate sustainably, yet they also need consistent team identities. If mandatory mergers are introduced without clear consultation, the league solves one financial problem by creating several commercial ones. Consider a hypothetical merger between a captain-driven team with a strong national identity and another built around a completely different audience. Which name survives? Whose colors remain? Who controls the roster? Does the losing captain become an employee, minority owner, or expensive spectator? Every answer produces winners and losers. Sponsors associated with the surviving identity may gain reach. Partners attached to the erased team may demand refunds, renegotiate, or leave. Players could discover that their personal obligations conflict with the new franchise's commercial categories. That is the first reason a boycott can spread. Sponsorship executives are paid to manage risk. Once one major company questions the stability of LIV's team system, others review their exposure. Nobody wants to become the final brand investing heavily in a structure everyone else expects to change. The second reason is leverage. Sponsors rarely control sporting formats directly, but collective withdrawal can force executives to listen. Tournament operations require title partners, hospitality sales, suppliers, media promotion, and local business relationships. 14 companies stepping back would transform a private disagreement into an operational threat. The fight is no longer about whether LIV's teams look entertaining on a leaderboard. It is about whether those teams can survive contact with real commercial discipline. LIV supporters will argue that restructuring is not surrender. Mature leagues relocate teams, combine assets, change owners, and rebrand struggling franchises. Formula One organizations have repeatedly changed names without destroying the championship. American sports teams have moved cities and retained enormous value. That counter-argument deserves respect. Protecting every original LIV identity forever could become financially irresponsible. If certain franchises attract little loyalty, weak sponsorship, and limited merchandise demand, forcing investors to subsidize them indefinitely would turn team golf into an expensive museum of unsuccessful logos. A merger might also create stronger rosters. Combining star power could produce genuine super teams, sharper rivalries, and more meaningful team championships. Fewer franchises could mean deeper talent and clearer narratives for casual viewers who currently struggle to remember every name. However, established sports usually restructure after building rules, governance, and consultation processes. Stakeholders understand relocation procedures, ownership rights, revenue sharing, and competitive consequences. LIV cannot simply declare consolidation and assume captains, players, sponsors, venues, and fans will applaud the spreadsheet. The word mandatory is therefore explosive. Voluntary mergers allow teams to negotiate value and design a shared future. Forced mergers suggest that league leadership can erase identities from above, possibly overriding the entrepreneurial control captains believed they were building. That could create resistance from the biggest names. DeChambeau's Crushers, Rahm's Legion 13, Johnson's Four Aces, Smith's Ripper, and Mickelson's High Flyers are tied heavily to their captains' public identities. Any restructuring affecting those franchises becomes a negotiation with major champions who joined LIV partly because it promised more control. Tell a superstar he owns a future franchise, then instruct him to merge it with somebody else, and the sales pitch begins to resemble a timeshare presentation conducted inside a bunker. The player may still possess equity, but the meaning of that equity becomes harder to understand. Valuation creates another problem. Teams cannot merge fairly without determining what each is worth. Revenue, sponsorship contracts, merchandise, social reach, player obligations, captain popularity, and future earning potential must be assessed. If valuations remain private or inconsistent, every merger will produce accusations of favoritism. The strongest teams may resent absorbing weaker partners. Struggling teams may argue that league-wide promotion, scheduling, and broadcast exposure prevented them from growing. Captains could claim their personal brands supplied value. LIV now wants to redistribute without adequate compensation. That division makes the reported coalition of 14 especially interesting. If sponsors across different commercial categories agree on a boycott, their shared concern is probably broader than loyalty to one team. They may be demanding transparency, consultation, and protection against abrupt structural change. Those requests would be reasonable. Brands plan campaigns months in advance. They reserve advertising budgets, create digital content, arrange hospitality, invite clients, and coordinate product launches. Mandatory mergers announced late can waste work and force companies to explain a confusing structure to customers. LIV could answer with guarantees. Existing sponsor agreements could be honored through transition periods. Merged franchises might retain heritage branding for selected events. Companies affected by disappearing teams could receive replacement inventory, expanded hospitality, or rights across the combined organization. Yet, compensation cannot solve everything. A sponsor may have chosen a team because its captain matched the brand. Move that company beside a different star with another personality, nationality, or reputation, and the partnership may no longer make strategic sense. Here is the nightmare scenario for LIV. Mandatory mergers could reduce costs while convincing sponsors that no team is permanent enough to deserve long-term investment. That would damage the franchise dream at its foundation. Team values depend on expectations of future cash flow. If sponsors refuse multi-year commitments because identities might disappear, projected revenue falls. Lower revenue reduces valuations. Falling valuations make captains question whether their promised equity is truly valuable. At some point, LIV would risk becoming what critics always claimed it was: an individual tournament series wearing team costumes. The logos might remain on scoreboards, but without durable ownership, loyal audiences, and independent revenue, the franchises would function as decorative columns rather than sporting institutions. PGA Tour loyalists would celebrate that outcome too quickly. Sponsor resistance to LIV does not automatically strengthen traditional golf. Corporations observing instability across the sport may reduce golf spending altogether, especially if the Tour-LIV divide continues producing unclear schedules, divided audiences, and competing demands. The PGA Tour also depends heavily on sponsors to fund tournaments and prize money. Its executives should study this reported revolt carefully. If companies believe golf organizations can change products without respecting commercial partners, that distrust will not remain confined to LIV. Professional golf has already asked sponsors to tolerate years of civil war. Players departed, lawsuits emerged, a framework agreement promised cooperation in 2023, but a complete reunification remained difficult. Fans heard endless language about negotiations while the strongest fields appeared together mainly at majors. Now, mandatory team merger demands would add another layer. Instead of discussing how LIV and the PGA Tour might coexist, executives could be debating which LIV franchises coexist with each other. Golf has somehow found a way to place a civil war inside the original Civil War. Even soap operas might request simpler writing. The players cannot ignore the sponsor boycott because commercial instability eventually reaches contracts. Guaranteed money may protect certain stars temporarily, but league economics determine roster depth, event quality, prize funds, and opportunities for everyone else. Reduced sponsorship makes every promise more expensive to keep. Lower-ranked LIV players would feel the greatest anxiety. Captains can negotiate from fame. Role players may be traded, released, or squeezed out when two rosters become one. A mandatory merger does not create extra lineup positions. It creates duplicate golfers competing for fewer seats. That threatens competitive fairness. Teams could use mergers to assemble stacked rosters, while displaced players receive no equivalent pathway. LIV would need transparent rules governing contracts, waivers, transfers, free agency, and compensation. Otherwise, consolidation becomes a private selection process controlled by powerful captains. Conversely, carefully selected mergers might strengthen regional appeal. Two compatible groups could share language, sponsors, or audiences. The difference lies in consent and planning. Strategic combination is not the same as mandatory survival surgery performed because the balance sheet is bleeding. 14 sponsors reportedly chose the boycott because polite concern was not enough. Their message appears straightforward: stabilize the structure before asking companies to finance it. That is not necessarily an attack on LIV. It may be the harsh intervention required to prevent worse decisions. LIV leadership now has several options. It can abandon mandatory mergers and allow market performance to determine which teams survive. It can proceed with consolidation after negotiations. It can create promotion, relegation, or expansion rules that give franchise change a competitive basis rather than an executive order. A temporary commercial council could also give sponsors a formal voice without allowing them to control sport. Representatives from teams, players, investors, broadcasters, and partners could review merger standards, transition periods, and branding protections. Transparency would reduce rumors and help companies calculate risk. The league must also publish a clear purpose for teams. Are they independent businesses, league-owned marketing units, or captain-controlled franchises? Each model can work, but pretending they are all three, whenever convenient, creates conflict. Ownership without decision-making power is merely a decorative certificate, and this is the question LIV must answer before another sponsor disappears. Were the teams built to become valuable, or were they built to make the league look different? If they were designed as real franchises, captains and partners deserve enforceable rights. Mergers should require valuations, consent, compensation, and long transition periods. If they remain league-controlled units, LIV should admit that reality and stop selling every logo as the next global sports empire. Fans deserve honesty, too. Supporters who invested emotionally in a team should know whether it can vanish after one executive meeting. Rivalries mean little when participants are temporary. Tradition cannot develop when branding changes faster than the leaderboard. The reported boycott may therefore become a turning point rather than a funeral. Commercial pressure can force better governance. LIV could emerge with fewer but stronger teams, clearer ownership, improved sponsor protection, and a structure capable of surviving beyond its founding money. Failure would produce the opposite. Sponsors would redirect budgets, captains would protect personal interests, players would reconsider their futures, and event organizers would struggle to sell a product undergoing permanent reconstruction. Mandatory mergers would then look less like strategy and more like controlled retreat. The 14 companies hold unusual leverage because LIV needs outside validation. Large purses proved the league could spend. Famous signings proved it could recruit. Mainstream sponsorship is supposed to prove it can generate sustainable demand. A boycott attacks that final claim. No amount of music, shotgun energy, or social media clips can replace commercial trust. Sponsors need to believe next season's team will resemble the one in their contract. Investors need confidence that franchise revenue can grow. Players need clarity about where they belong. LIV's original gamble was that team golf could disrupt an individual sport. Its next gamble may be forcing those teams together without destroying the loyalty they have barely begun to build. That shot carries water on both sides and no comfortable layup. Comment, merge if LIV should consolidate weak teams, or protect if every franchise deserves independence. Subscribe as we track the sponsor revolt and the decision that could reshape professional golf. 14 sponsors are reportedly refusing to fund uncertainty. Unless LIV provides a convincing answer, its team revolution may be merged out of existence before it ever becomes a tradition worth defending someday.